Well, Razorback fans, we haven't heard much chatter about Arkansas's point guard problem since Boogie Fland silenced the critics Friday night, but that's just one of many storylines to come out of Arkansas's exhibition beatdown of Kansas in Bud Walton Arena. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, everybody, to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the Pod at the Palace edition. Curtis Wilkerson here with you, joined today by my right-hand man and resident ball knower, Andrew Ellis. We're going to talk about this Arkansas-Kansas exhibition because, oh, buddy, that was a fun night in Bud Walton Arena. Arkansas 85, number one, Kansas 69. So that's nice. Got a little blowout victory over the number one squad in the country. Yeah, Hunter Dickinson was out. We get it. Hey, guess what? Jonas Aidoo was out for Arkansas too. But the big picture perspective from this is you don't look at it too much moving forward, but you can be really, really excited about what happened with Arkansas in this particular game. First impression, it was a good one for the Razorbacks, ahead of schedule from what I thought they were going to be. Andrew, what did you think, man?
Well, am I mistaken in thinking that Purdue was ranked number one when Arkansas beat them in an exhibition game last year? Were they like top two, top three?
They had to have been number one in some polls, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we pump a bunch of sunshine, which we are going to do because that was an awesome performance by the Razorbacks, and we went into it kind of like you said, tempering expectations. Like we were prepared for Arkansas to lose by 8, have the Jonas Aidoo, have the new roster, Coach Cal's first year. Kansas is more of a veteran returning team. We had all the built-in excuses ready to roll, and we didn't even have to use them. And so this feels a little bit different to me than that Purdue game last year, where, it was a nice performance last year, and I certainly didn't think Arkansas was headed towards the season they were a year ago. But this just felt like Arkansas, a coming out party. And nationally, it felt like Arkansas had plenty of tension on them regardless. Like even if they had gotten blown out in this game, they were going to be a popular storyline. But I feel like Arkansas kind of stole some headlines nationally, which I don't think this is the last time they're going to do that this year. And it was just a lot of fun. And it was a huge crowd. Awesome crowd, and it felt like a spectacle, and that's what Arkansas basketball is under John Calipari at the moment.
Exactly. Very cool atmosphere, man. And you're right. Arkansas was going to be in the headlines regardless. And I'm sure a lot of people were ready and waiting to start firing off the tweets or whatever about John Calipari losing his fastball and, oh, this Arkansas team's they're overrated. They're not going to get it done. And then nobody got to really say that. And a lot of critics were silenced for now. And that's all you can go off is what you have right in front of you. And, one of the biggest question marks that people had, anybody who was fading Arkansas, a lot of it was about the point guard position. Does Arkansas really have a point guard? Boy, it doesn't seem like it. Oh, they don't have a true point guard. You got to have this. You got to have that. I'm concerned about how's it going to work in the backcourt. Well, Boogie Fland shut everybody up in this game. He was really, really good, Andrew. I mean, talk about first impressions. Holy cow, man. 22 points in this game for Boogie Fland, 8 of 15 from the field, 5 of 7 from the free throw line. He had 5 assists to just 2 turnovers, and one of those turnovers came very late. 6 steals. That is absurd because that is one area that we were wondering how would he hold up. Well, it looks like he's a pest. He did this, Andrew, all while matched up against one of the oldest, most experienced point guards in the country, a national championship winning point guard in DeJuan Harris. Really, really good stuff from Boogie Fland.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like an NBA athlete right off the bat, and obviously he's gotten a ton of buzz as a potential, lottery pick, first-round pick, depending on where you look. He's very much on that NBA radar, and he looked like an NBA guy right off the bat. And here's the thing, Curtis, he went, 1 of 6 from three-point land, which he's going to have games where he hits 3 or 4 threes. Like, he's going to shoot the ball pretty consistently. We expect him to be a factor there from outside, and so the fact that he was able to get to whatever spot on the floor he wanted at any point, again, like you mentioned, against one of the better point guards in the country, more experienced teams in the country, it was really impressive. And for him to impose his will says a lot about kind of what type of player and type of talent he is. And, the thing that really stuck out to me is, like I said, he got to any spot he wanted to. So it's like, it wasn't unsustainable. It wasn't like, hey, you came in your first game and you hit 5 threes, but will you hit 5 threes next week? It's like, no, teams are going to have to account for him rather than he's going to have to adjust to college basketball. And I'm sure teams will adjust to him plenty, but Boogie Fland, man, it was a very loud first impression. And there were a lot of good individual performances for the Razorbacks that really, I think, matter more than the team overall product. But I think Boogie Fland is the headliner, man. He stole the show. And, you check Twitter after the game and every draft analyst, every national writer, everybody was like, holy cow. I think we all knew Boogie Fland was a good, talented player. But you mentioned ahead of schedule for the Arkansas Razorbacks early. Boogie Fland is ahead of what I had in my brain in terms of how I expected him to impact this season.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. I mean, I think Boogie on Friday was what folks expected Nick Smith to be coming out. And that's not a shot at Nick. I mean, he was obviously hampered by the knee injuries and all that. But I think my point is the way Boogie popped, and he really looked like that McDonald's All-American who's ready to contribute in a big way right away on a really good team. That's what we saw. That was that electric factor that we were waiting for, in 2022, 23, and that we got with Boogie Fland in this one. I always go back to that Texas exhibition that we were at, where those three freshmen, man, those McDonald's All-Americans just looked overwhelmed by that physicality, just the pressure, the veteran, the old heads got to them in that Texas backcourt. These Arkansas freshmen did not look overwhelmed at all, particularly Boogie Fland. He was really impressive. And honestly, he's going to have his ups and downs. That's a fact. That's just the case with anybody, including freshmen. But it's hard to not be blown away with what we saw in the first glimpse of him on Friday. And really, Boogie is just he's just one piece of a backcourt trio that's really, really loaded with potential that people are excited about. We're going to talk about that more and some of the comments that Bill Self had about it. But first, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners. All right, folks, I want to tell you about our friends over at ZBiotics. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. We've all been there. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next days after a long night of drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. It's a 3-step process. 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night before you even get started. Get the party rolling. Step 2, as always, drink responsibly, right? Pace yourself, hydrate, make sure you get yourself a good night's sleep. And then step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed by 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head over to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the Pot at the Palace edition. We spent some time there talking about Boogie Fland, but really it was this entire backcourt that has people excited. DJ Wagner had a huge game. Boy, he looked like an improved version of himself from what we saw at Kentucky last year. And a big part of that, Andrew, is the man is healthy. And some of the things that John Calipari said about him was, in the preseason of, hey, I get it. Like maybe he wasn't that great down the stretch, but he was hurt. Look at what he did before his injury. And then, saying things like, hey, he's more explosive. He's more athletic. He's emerging as a leader. He's more confident. That's all great to hear in theory, but you want to see it, right? And then what does DJ go out there and do in his first dress rehearsal as a Razorback? He hits 2 threes in like the first 3 minutes of the game. He finishes this one with a team high 24 points. He's 8 of 12 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. You love to see it. 4 rebounds in there, a couple turnovers, but also had a steal. He looked really, really good. And that's a dynamic 1-2 punch. And what surprised me about it, it was Boogie Fland, who the true freshman looks so smooth, calm, cool, and collected back there as PG1, just operating in ball screens, initiating the offense. And DJ Wagner looks super comfortable playing off the ball. And he is a dude who, if he can shoot it, he ain't got to be 50% every night, but if he can be a threat, man, with the way he gets downhill and can finish, that's a tough 1-2 punch. We're not even talking about Nelly Davis yet, who's still shaking off the rust from that wrist injury.
Yeah, man, when you think about DJ Wagner, this time last year, he was in the Boogie Fland position as the 5-star who's coming in and showing some flashes early where you're like, hey, this is a first-round pick. Like, this is an NBA player. And, there was so much excitement around him as a player, which may have been a little bit misplaced because he needed a little bit of time to develop. And obviously he was banged up, like you mentioned. And so he's somewhere between his results last year, which admittedly weren't great, and what he was billed as coming in as a freshman. I feel like what I saw out of him, you see the athleticism, you see he does look like a more explosive, more athletic version of himself. He looks healthy, but I really liked the confidence, the decision-making, aside from a couple stupid turnovers, his ability to play off ball I think the first 2 threes he hit were both spot up opportunities.
Yep.
Seems like he's really going to thrive as an off guard, that can play with a guy like Boogie Fland, and obviously Nelly Davis, who you mentioned, shaking off the rust clearly, like was not his best self. We don't even know how much he's really been practicing behind the scenes leading up to that scrimmage, and it kind of looked like that. But I feel like DJ Wagner is such an important piece because we know how good Nelly Davis is. I'm not going to lose any sleep over his performance the other night, and we see the flashes there with Boogie Fland, who looks like a guy who can be a real lead guard for this Arkansas team. And so DJ Wagner is the kind of the X factor here, where if Arkansas is getting a good version of him, it just takes the ceiling of this group to a whole new level. And it really makes it harder to defend this team because, you might have answers for Boogie Fland. Hey, you might have a good game plan for Nelly Davis. Maybe if you've seen him play a few times, he's been in college basketball a while, but then are you going to have plans for that third option, that DJ Wagner, who can just kill you off the bounce and can, is now knocking down threes? I mean, what did he shoot 29% last year? Yeah. We felt like he had a chance to be an improved shooter. I'm sure he's not going to go, 3 of 5, 4 of 6 every game. But I think he's clearly going to be a threat. And overall, I just really like the confidence. He looked like a second-year guard who kind of is rubbed the wrong way by how his freshman year played out and has something to prove, has a chip on his shoulder. And when you take into account the role he's being asked to play, which is basically your third guard, I think he's overqualified for that role, and it really excites me about this Arkansas backcourt.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And then on the flip side of things, we mentioned, Boogie Fland is a guy who gets 6 steals in this game, so super disruptive. And he does it a little bit differently, where he's just got great instincts, quickness. He can kind of jump out in those passing lanes. He'll pick you up 94 feet. He's more of a pest. DJ Wagner is a bulldog defensively. I mean, he is a tenacious on-ball defender. A couple times in that first quarter, he's picking up DeJuan Harris or Zeke Mayo, whoever it was, and really just kind of getting in their shorts, applying a lot of pressure. And that's the kind of stuff that gets the crowd going, man. They love that stuff. You couldn't get by him. He was like glue out there. So if you think about those two, and then we know a guy like Nelly Davis, he averaged, I think, a couple steals per game last year, could be a really disruptive backcourt defensively. And we're not even talking about some of their other lengthy wings, like an Adu Thiero, who might be one of the best defenders in the SEC. So it's really good to see. Let me ask you this, because Bill Self after the game had some high praise for that Arkansas backcourt. He said, listen, we know that Boogie Fland's really, really good. Everybody knows that DJ Wagner's really good, and probably Arkansas's most talented guard. He's speaking to Nelly Davis, obviously, isn't quite there yet, meaning coming back from his injury. And he said multiple times that is the best trio of guards that we're going to face all year. This is coming from an active Hall of Famer in Bill Self, who plays in the Big 12 with a brutal schedule, that's already calling Arkansas one of the best backcourts in the country. Like Cal said, way too early to say things like that or compare him to some of his past Kentucky teams or whatever. But are you buying what Bill Self is selling here in terms of the potential of this backcourt to be one of the best in the SEC and maybe the country?
So I'm buying it with the obvious caveat that coach speak is a thing, and you get your tail whipped by Arkansas. What are you going to do? You're going to go to the press conference and say, I'm not sold on that group. I don't think they're very good. Of course, he was going to have good things to say, but I do take Bill Self's opinion for one, what he's accomplished in college basketball as a head coach. You should listen to what that guy has to say, but specifically when he's comparing this Arkansas team to previous Cal teams, because I don't know if there's a coach outside of the SEC who has faced Calipari's SEC team or faced Calipari's Kentucky teams more than Bill Self, because they play in the Champions Classic like literally every year, or they're at least in the same building every year. So he's gotten an up close and personal look at the De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk teams, the Tyler Ulysses, who's now on staff at Arkansas, the Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Carter Kevin Knox, not to be confused with Carter Knox, his brother at Arkansas. So I think he has a unique perspective on some of these backcourts that Cal's had. And look, we'll see where they rank in terms of, are they the best he's ever had, whatever like that. But I definitely think for college basketball this year, I'm sure there's a team out there, I'd have to go scan, that has comparable pieces there, has some real next level talent, or has a group that plays well together. But just on paper, it's really not that hard to make the argument for Arkansas that they're one of the best backcourts in the country, especially if the Boogie Fland that we all kind of viewed as a talented freshman who could really help Arkansas, he might be leading Arkansas, which based on what we saw the other night. And so I think he's a real X factor where it's like, you can kind of talk me into a lot here. But Nelly Davis is one where, if you were going to pick one guy to struggle the other night, Nelly Davis would have been your pick, because he's the safest out of all these options. I mean, he's a very proven big game experience, made clear strides throughout his career. Like, I'm not worried about him at all. And so to see DJ and Boogie be so far ahead of schedule, I'm buying it, man. I really do think I think Arkansas has one of the better backcourts in the country. And I think Bill Self is someone who you should take his opinion very seriously.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And listen, Boogie Fland, DJ Wagner are not going to combine for 46 points per night. They won't do that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say at TCU on Friday. But guess what? I don't think John L. Davis is going to go 2 for 9 and be held to 5 points in that game. So there's going to be ebbs and flows there, but you got a ton of talent in that backcourt. And then, of course, it's not all about the backcourt. We got to talk about our big man, Big Z. But first, let's take one more break to hear from a partner. I tell you what, if you missed out on that atmosphere at Bud Walton Arena on Friday night, you missed out on a lot. That was really, really cool. And I know the tickets went fast, but you can always go get them at game time. Buddy, I know I'd be checking them out moving forward because that's something you want to be a part of. And this TCU exhibition on Friday, tickets are still available for that. You got to go check out Game Time because that's the spot to go get your tickets for these live events. There's something to be said for watching a game in the comforts of your own home, but you're missing out a little bit on that atmosphere. And then for this TCU exhibition, guess what? It's not going to be on TV, so you can't watch it unless you're there. So make sure you go check out Game Time and get all set up with those guys. They got a lot going on over there. You got your Game Time picks, curation that makes it easier to save money. More on sports, concerts, comedy, theater. It doesn't just have to be a basketball game. They've got the all-in pricing, and Tagline this feature shows the total up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. You get that a lot with some of the other places. You got the seat views, which I really like. That gives you the panoramic view from your seat before you make the purchase. That way there's no surprises when you actually get into the arena. I've also got that lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So make sure you get over, check out Game Time before you get your tickets. That is the go-to place for your ticket needs. All right, back for the final segment of the Pod at the Palace edition of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast here. We talked a lot about the backcourt. Well, we got to talk about our big fella, Big Z, man. That was fun to watch because, maybe the most electric moments from Big Z that we've seen since his debut against Georgia at Kentucky last year. Such a cool story with him, a guy who arrived late, obviously from Croatia. He was not eligible to play right away at Kentucky. It wasn't until January that they got the NCAA to clear him, and it was just a tough spot for him to be in. Transfers to Arkansas with John Calipari. He had a full offseason, strength and conditioning, had a full offseason under the big man whisperer, Kenny Payne. And you thought, man, this dude is so uniquely talented. 7'2", 245. We know he can pass it. We know he can shoot it. Calipari's talking about running the offense through him. What is this going to look like? Well, against Kansas in the first dress rehearsal, it looked like 18 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists from the big fella, and a block shot and a lot of others that were altered. Had some things going on there, a handful of turnovers. He's really good at securing a rebound and then guys just popping it out of his hands out there. So got to be a little bit stronger and more physical. Man, your big dude's out there dropping dimes. He's hitting threes, baseline little drop step and dunking on a guy. That was a hell of an opener for Big Z, man. It was fun to see. And I wonder, is this going to be a common theme moving forward with him? Has he really taken that next step from role player to somebody that can really be a dude for Arkansas?
Will he be averaging 18 points a game? I would say probably not.
If he does, you'll have him for 1 year.
There were moments in the game, or especially early on, where I thought, man, Big Z's like really looks, it's taking him a while to settle in. And I thought Trevin Brazil looked awesome. Yep. And then it kind of flipped there in the second half where I was like, okay, Trevin's getting a little crazy here. But Big Z really turned it on there in the second half. Finishes 2 of 5 from 3. I'm absolutely buying his ability as a spacer. As a big man that can really step out and shoot the ball. And Arkansas struggled to find guards that can shoot the ball, Curtis. They really haven't had a 5-man, and Big Z's going to play plenty at the 5 this year, who can spread the floor like that and legitimately be a threat. So I believe he adds a lot of spacing to this team.
Throwing shots at Connor Vanover.
Hey, let's just, I get why the comparison is there. I heard some people making it the other day. Let's just agree to not do it. Let's just move it on. New era. We don't have to do it. But anytime he has a bad game, you can believe those memes are going to be popping. But Curtis, I was impressed with his ability as a rim protector. You said he had the one block, and That number surprised me when I looked at the stat broadcast after the game. I felt like he was affecting or had his hand on about 2 or 3 shots. But I thought, yeah, he did a good job there. It's all about positioning with him. If he's able to actually be there in front of the rim when the shot is going up, he's going to have a good chance to contest him there at 7-2. But I think I really like his offensive skill set. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit up and down, his production. It's not going to be consistent. They've said they want to run offense through him, but he's not going to be a guy that is just a consistent 14, 15, 16 points per game. But I do think that last night kind of shows what teams are going to have to account for. And if in the certain matchups, I think he's a real game wrecker on the offensive end. And I think his defense was better than I expected it to be, honestly. And so I think between him and Trevin just gives Arkansas's front court some versatility and some playmaking that they really haven't had in past years. And I think even Big Z himself, you said it yourself, like last year wasn't really the full Big Z experience. I think he's going to be a lot more comfortable in year 2. And so I think he's going to be a guy that continues to grow. And I do think there's going to be certain matchups where he's going to kill some teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what it made me feel like is it makes me feel a lot better about Arkansas's front court in the interim until they get Jonas Adu back out there. And then it also makes me feel a lot better about what he can bring to the table as what's most likely going to be a 6-man, coming off the bench behind Jonas Adu. That's a hell of a 1-2 punch, man, because those guys are so different in terms of what they bring to the table. Adu, much more of an anchor on the defensive end of the floor, more of a back to the basket and a guy who can score around the bucket so much. And then you bring in a guy like Z, who's just a completely different matchup to prepare for with his ability to space the floor, like you mentioned, the way that he can pass out of there. And then he also brings some of that dynamic of being able to protect the rim and everything. That's a really good 1-2 punch. I like seeing him and Trevin Brazile playing out there because, it's not the most physical front court in the world, but man, there's so much spacing and versatility with what those two guys can do. It's just a really, really tough cover when you have that. And then you can mix and match with him. You like having a Duke the Arrow maybe at the 4 when you have Z at the 5, because it doesn't matter which one it is. If one of them can space the floor so you're not all clogged up, then you're in a pretty good spot there. But yeah, quite the debut for our big man, Big Z. And honestly, I wonder who we're going to be talking about on Friday, because like we said, Arkansas had some really good performances from the 3 guys that we've talked a lot about, and Boogie and DJ and Zvonimir there, but then other guys who are probably going to pick it up and play a lot better moving forward. Carter Knox comes to mind, Adut Thiero comes to mind, Trevin Brazile, and then obviously John L. Davis. So it's going to be really fun to continue to watch these guys progress and grow as we get closer to the season and once we get into this thing. But folks, that's going to wrap us up for today's edition of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, Pot at the Palace edition. Appreciate you all for tuning in as always. So for Andrew Ellis and Curtis Wilkerson, we're out of here, but we'll see you guys again soon. Everybody have a good one. Appreciate you.